In Game 6 of the 1996 Western Conference Finals, Colorado's hard-nosed forward, Claude Lemieux, blindsided Detroit's Kris Draper, driving Draper's face into the boards from behind. The hit was gruesome. Draper suffered a broken jaw, battered cheekbone, and orbital bone, requiring extensive reconstructive surgery, and his jaw wired shut. Lemieux showed little remorse, enraging the Red Wings.
I can't believe I shook this guy's friggin' hand after the game. That pisses me right off.
The Avalanche went on to win the game, the series, and eventually the Stanley Cup, while the Red Wings were left enraged from Lemieux's cheap shot and its awful aftermath. The bad blood between the two teams was now boiling. Lemieux was suspended for 2 games of the Stanley Cup final, but he never apologized to Draper. That summer, the Red Wings stewed over the incident. The normally stoic coach, Scotty Bowman, even kept photos of Draper's horrific facial injuries, fueling the sense of injustice. The stage was set for an eventual reckoning. The fuse had been lit in the spring of '96, and it was only a matter of time before it ignited an explosion. But that's not where it started. Let's go back a little bit. Although that collision officially set the feud ablaze, the frustration was piling up back when the Avalanche were the Nordiques. Lemieux already had been a nightmare for Detroit the previous spring, earning the Conn Smythe as his Devils swept the underachieving Wings to claim the 1995 Stanley Cup. After a contract standoff, New Jersey sent him to the freshly relocated Quebec Nordiques, who were now at Denver and rebranded as the Colorado Avalanche, with future Hall of Famers like Joe Sakic and Peter Forsberg. The rivalry's first official chapter was written on Avalanche's first day of existence in their new city. On October 6, 1995, the Avalanche played their inaugural game in Denver against none other than the Detroit Red Wings. In a statement-making debut, the new team defeated the powerhouse Red Wings 3-2, and the game-winning goal was assisted by none other than Claude Lemieux. While Lemieux was the first antagonist, another player, who added fuel to the fire, arrived via the most dramatic trades in hockey history. His name was Patrick Roy, and he was arguably the best goaltender in the world. However, his relationship with his team's coach, Mario Tremblay, was notoriously toxic. The tension boiled over on December 2, 1995, in a home game against the Detroit Red Wings, in what would become the worst home loss for the Canadiens in their entire history. The Red Wings mercilessly shelled Roy, scoring goal after goal. Typically, a coach will pull a star goalie from a game that has gotten out of hand to spare him further embarrassment. Tremblay, however, left Roy in net to suffer. As the score ballooned to 9-1, the Montreal crowd began to cheer sarcastically when Roy made a simple save. When Tremblay finally pulled him from the game, Roy walked past his coach and told him directly, "It's my last game in Montreal." 4 days later, his demand was granted. Patrick Roy was traded to the Colorado Avalanche. The Red Wings were the direct instrument of Roy's ultimate public humiliation, an event so profound it forced a franchise icon out of his city. Roy arrived in Colorado with a Stanley Cup pedigree and a deep personal and very fresh despise for the Detroit Red Wings. Following that opening night loss, the Red Wings went on to win 3 straight games against Colorado in the regular season. However, things got interesting in the Western Conference Finals. The Red Wings were a powerhouse. They had won an NHL record 62 games during the regular season, earning the President's Trophy. They were the overwhelming favorites to win the Stanley Cup and to finally end their 42-year Stanley Cup drought. In their path, however, was none other than the Avalanche. The series was intense from the start. May 19, 1996, with the series starting in Detroit, the Avalanche stole the first 2 wins from the home crowd in Detroit. Tensions escalated, however, in Game 3, when Detroit's Slava Kozlov hit defenseman Adam Foote from behind. A dangerous play that went unpenalized. Claude Lemieux took matters into his own hands and retaliated later in the game by sucker punching Kozlov in the back of the head, because Kozlov's earlier shove from behind had gashed the face of Colorado's Adam Foote. After the 6-4 Detroit victory, as Lemieux walked with his family through the parking lot, they passed the Wings team bus. Suddenly, Coach Scotty Bowman stepped into the open doorway and spoke harshly to Lemieux, who discussed it the next morning. "I'm walking out with my child, my wife, my nephew, and my family." Bowman just started yelling out of the bus, which is a weird thing. The door was still open and he took a step down and said, "Nice sucker punch, you blankety blank. I hope you get suspended." After Bowman allegedly demanded an NHL review, the league suspended Lemieux for Game 4. Bowman, however, denied this, and this really pissed off the Avalanche. The teams picked themselves 1 win in the next 2 matches, then returned to Denver for Game 6, in which Lemieux delivered the devastating blow. Detroit, up 1-0 in the first period, Lemieux barreled full speed into Red Wings center Kris Draper from behind. Draper's face was driven into the boards, and as mentioned, the impact shattered his jaw, cheek, and orbital bone, requiring extensive surgery. Lemieux received only a 2-game suspension, and his team went on to win the series and the Stanley Cup. Lemieux never apologized, and Detroit spent the entire summer plotting revenge. Detroit's enforcer, Darren McCarty, later admitted he spent the whole offseason thinking about payback. "I was going to beat Lemieux within an inch of his life." Goaltender Chris said another suspension of Lemieux would not suffice and that the Red Wings would deal with him the next season. "It's not a threat, it's something that's going to happen." The following season came, and due to Lemieux tearing a muscle, he was sidelined for the first two Detroit-Colorado games. Lemieux missed the first two matchups, one of them featuring the removal of two Colorado players on stretchers. Lemieux played in the third match in Denver on March 16, but no fireworks took place. They exchanged some words, but the Avalanche walked away with a victory. However, the Wings fan base was there that night, and many hoisted signs that depicted Lemieux's name on a tombstone. The Avs would visit Detroit in 10 days for the final matchup of the regular season. Newspapers in Detroit and Denver fired up the situation even more. A Denver Post columnist wrote, "Detroit so hates Lemieux it can taste bile, but the Red Wings can't hurt him, can't intimidate him, can't touch him." In Detroit, however, a headline appeared everywhere, "A time for revenge," and put Lemieux's face on a wanted poster. Colorado players downplayed the grudge. "The Lemieux Draper thing is over now," Keane said. "They had their chances to settle the score last game." But goalie Patrick Waugh offered a more realistic prediction. "It will be a very interesting game." When the Avalanche reached Detroit, Lemieux was getting death threats. A security guard protected his door to his hotel room. On the night of March 26th, the Avalanche got a police escort to the arena, in which a sellout crowd of almost 20,000 Red Wings fans were buzzing with electricity. The game began, and it didn't take long for the sparks to fly. Near the end of the first period, the chaos finally erupted. A wrestling match between Detroit's Igor Larinov, Colorado star Peter Forsberg, along the boards provided the flashpoint. Darren McCarty saw Lemieux standing alone and knew this was his moment. McCarty broke free from the grasp of an official and zeroed in on his target. In an instant, McCarty blindsided Lemieux with a vicious right hook, dropping the Avalanche forward on the ice. What followed was McCarty's long-awaited vengeance. He grabbed Lemieux and relentlessly rained down punches on him. Lemieux had no answer. He grappled and covered his head, but McCarty kept throwing the punches, even kneeling on Lemieux and driving a knee into his head. From there, a full-on brawl erupted into the game. With that first punch, I had the power of the whole city of Detroit, the power of 1 million Red Wings fans. In that fist, McCarty accounted later. Blood spattered on the ice as Lemieux's face was split open, and the linesmen tried their best to get McCarty off Lemieux. All hell broke loose. Seeing his teammate being mauled, goaltender Patrick Waugh sprinted out of his net to intervene, but Waugh could not reach McCarty. Detroit forward Brendan Shanahan intercepted him with a flying body check at center ice that sent Waugh crashing on the ice. Shanahan and Colorado's Adam Foote then tangled as players from both teams flooded onto the ice. In the chaos, Waugh got back up and grabbed Detroit goalie Mike Vernon, who had raced out to join the fray. The two netminders squared off at the ice, and the arena crowd roared as goalies started trading punches. What ensued was perhaps the most famous goalie fight in NHL history, spinning brawl at center ice, with revenge on Detroit's mind. Waugh landed a few big shots, bloodying Vernon's forehead, but Vernon answered with a flurry of punches that took Waugh down to the ice. By the time officials separated them, Waugh had a cut over his right eyebrow, leaking blood, and Vernon's jersey was splattered with it. The first period ended with multiple brawls having transpired, and the crowd in a frenzy. McCarty received a double minor for roughing, no major for fighting or anything like that, and obviously more was to come in the second. Just 4 seconds into the second period, Shanahan and Foote, who had already fought, dropped the gloves to officially fight once again. Then later in the second, there were more simultaneous fights on different parts of the ice. Detroit's rookie, Thomas Holmstrom, scrapped with Mike Keane, while nearby, Severin and Detroit's Aaron Ward fought as well. Those two were promptly ejected for being a secondary fight. McCarty even fought again, exchanging blows with Deadmarsh in another melee on the second. Finally, Detroit's Jamie Pusher fought Colorado's UV Krupp for good measure. It seemed every player on both rosters fought at least once. In total, referees handed out 18 fighting majors and 148 minutes in penalties during the game. Amid the carnage, the main combatants received shockingly light punishments during the game. Darren McCarty was not ejected. He only received a double minor for roughing. Referee Paul Dvorsky admitted afterward, "Yes, McCarty should have definitely had been thrown out. I really screwed up on that game. But in my heart, I just said, you know what, this is justice." It was as if the officials themselves understood the backdrop and almost allowed Detroit a measure of vengeance. As the brawl dust settled, there was still a game to play. Patrick Roy, despite fighting himself, was allowed to remain in the net, and the third period ended with the game tied at 5-5. The game went to overtime, and just 39 seconds into OT, the script reached its perfect climax. Darren McCarty found himself on a breakaway and slipped the puck past Patrick Roy, scoring the game-winning goal. Of all the guys to score the winning goal, it's the guy who should have been thrown out. It's just like putting salt on the wound, referee Dvorsky later said in amazement. McCarty raised his arms in triumph, later saying, "I slayed the dragon that night," and the Red Wings mobbed him. "It was just an exhale moment. We did it, we're going to be alright," McCarty said. The scoreboard read 6-5, and the once daunting Avalanche had finally been vanquished. After the game, Scotty Bowman said that none of this needed to happen.
And there's worse things that have happened than that, and there'll be worse things that happen again, but, and I don't think any player in the league is trying to injure another one. But all we needed, could all been put away, if he would have said, he's sorry. And that doesn't take much.
Just 2 months later, Colorado and Detroit had a Western Conference Final rematch, and this time, the outcome was much different, with Detroit defeating Colorado in 6 games to claim revenge. The series was punctured by a 6-0 blowout win for Detroit in Game 4, during which Avalanche coach Mark Crawford stood on his bench, screaming at the legendary Red Wings coach Scotty Bowman. Bowman calmly replying, "I knew your father before you did, and I don't think he'd be very proud of how you're acting." Detroit went on to sweep the Philadelphia Flyers in the final, winning the first Stanley Cup in 42 years. The hatred, however, was not settled yet. The next season, during a game on November 11th, 1997, between the two teams, McCarty and Lemieux began to throw punches seconds after the opening face-off, and on April 1st, 1998, the rivalry produced another iconic brawl. Patrick Roy challenged Detroit's new starting goalie, Chris Osgood. The two met at center ice for another wild goalie fight. Having been bodied the year before, Roy was determined to win the rematch, landing numerous punches on Osgood. Despite losing the game, Roy skated away in celebration. In an interview with Osgood years later, Osgood understood that this was the turning point.
I think none of us wanted to give an edge to the other. None of us wanted to go on a losing streak and say, hey, we got them now. We got the momentum. And especially going in the playoff, I still have that famous game in my mind. We were rolling, beat Detroit and beat you guys in the playoff the year before, and then that night, it really affected us a lot in a way that we lost our focus that night. We were looking at the wrong thing. We were looking to revenge instead winning hockey games. Took us a couple of years, to be honest with you.
For the first time in years, the teams didn't meet in the playoffs, and Detroit got another Stanley Cup victory, a back-to-back Stanley Cup victory. Just as it seemed Detroit had seized control of the rivalry, the Avalanche reasserted their dominance. They eliminated the Red Wings from the playoffs in back-to-back seasons, winning their 1999 second-round series 4-2 and their 2000 second-round series in a dominant 4-1 fashion. In November 1999, Claude Lemieux was traded from Colorado, removing one of the feud's original villains, but by this point the rivalry had grown far beyond any single player. It was a hatred and clash of two proud, elite organizations fighting for supremacy. In 2001, the Avalanche reached the pinnacle once again, winning their second Stanley Cup. The final epic confrontation of the rivalry's peak era came in 2002, Western Conference Finals. The series was tied 3-3, setting up winner-take-all Game 7 in Detroit. The deciding game, a poetic, if painful bookend to Patrick Roy's history with the Red Wings. The rivalry had been supercharged by Detroit, humiliating him in an 11-1 blowout in Montreal. In this final high-stakes game, history repeated itself. The Red Wings dominated the Avalanche, winning the game in a stunning 7-0 shutout. Roy was pulled from the net after allowing 6 goals, a final humiliation at the hands of his greatest rival. Detroit went on to win the Stanley Cup, closing the most intense chapter of the Avalanche Red Wings history. After years of fighting and clawing for every inch of the ice, Patrick Roy himself later admitted that the sheer intensity of the rivalry may have become a distraction for both teams, consuming so much emotional energy that it sometimes overshadowed the ultimate goal of winning. The rivalry's intensity was deeply tied to the specific players involved. When Patrick Roy, the fiery heart of Colorado's resistance, retired in 2003, a major pillar of feud was removed. Over the years, key figures like Darren McCarty, Steve Yzerman, Joe Sakic, Peter Forsberg also moved on, and Claude Lemieux got traded to the Devils. Years later, after the battles ended, the two central figures, Darren McCarty and Claude Lemieux, found a way to move past the hate. They began appearing together at fan conventions and autograph signings, often signing photos of the infamous brawl. In 2022, on the 25th anniversary of Bloody Wednesday, they even sat down together in a bar to rewatch the game, to reflect on the intensity of the game. They now express mutual respect, acknowledging that what happened on the ice was part of the game, and they can leave it in the past. Lemieux, reflecting on the rivalry, stated that the goal is to teach the next generation that you can compete at the highest level, but you leave it on the ice. The path to peace has been more complicated for Kris Draper, the original victim. He never got a personal apology from Lemieux, and that left a wound that never fully healed. In an article he wrote in 2017, Draper recounted a moment in the NHL 2014 draft when Lemieux approached him and his family. Lemieux politely introduced himself to Draper's wife and children and shook everyone's hand. Draper was glad for the moment, noting, "The beauty of our game is that at the end of the day, as much older men, we are still able to shake hands."